Hello and welcome back to TLDR's UK politics podcast, Starmergeddon. It's been a while.
It's a very long time.
And we've replaced Ben Blissett, TLDR's UK... Oh, I don't have to give him a special title because he's not here this week.
He's gone.
But instead, I am joined today by Rory Taylor, TLDR's Deputy Editor-in-Chief.
Hello.
Hello.
It's good to be on Starmergeddon.
Is this your first Starmergeddon appearance?
I think I hosted it many weeks ago, but this is my first time in the Ben seat.
In the hot
seat.
As it
were, in the hot seat, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Well, Rory's going to deliver for us today on several topics. As you know, we have three main sections to the Starmergeddon podcast. We've got a main topic, we've got our cabinet review where we discuss one of Starmer's cabinet ministers and what they've been up to, and then we have a final additional extra story. Rory, can you introduce what main topic we're talking about?
Yeah, so we're going to be talking about this new, sort of new, Jeremy Corbyn / Zara Sultana led left-wing party. This is a story that is a few weeks old now. It was announced a few weeks ago, but we're starting to get polls, hypothetical polls that include this party in there. So it is worth sort of reflecting on that now. It is worth saying that despite this being announced a few weeks ago, it was around July the 4th, I think, or just before, it doesn't actually exist yet. The announcement was an announcement that they will form a party at some point. And there was a bit of a debacle with the announcement. Zara Sultana jumped the gun slightly, it seemed. Jeremy Corbyn took about a day to actually put out his own statement, which was a bit less sort of affirmative. He didn't use the term co-lead, and he said, work is in progress. So we don't really know what the timeline is. A little bit shaky there, but the general idea is that Zara Sultana, the former Labour MP, and Jeremy Corbyn, former Labour leader, both kicked out of the party, will form a new movement that seeks to sort of take on Labour from the left. Sultana cited things like Labour's refusal to scrap the two-child benefit limit, obviously the war in Gaza. Both Corbyn and Sultana are very critical of sort of the Labour government's response to that. So those are sort of the big issues for them. I think what's most interesting now, a few weeks on, is that we've had three polls, I think, that include this hypothetical party in
Which
them.
doesn't yet have a name.
Yes, doesn't have a name. Suggestions in the comments below. Let's see what you can come up with. So the three polls put this party on between 8 and 15%. There's one on 8%, one on 10%, and one on 15%, which is a pretty solid block. Obviously, once it actually does form and it has a name and policies and things, hopefully we'll get a clearer picture of where it stands in the polls. But yeah, those are three pretty strong debuts. I think what's most dramatic is the most recent one, which is from Find Out Now. Jeremy Corbyn, Zara Sultana party on 15%, which puts them equal with Labour on 15%, which is terrible for Labour. Yeah. The other ones don't have Labour quite that low. The others have them on about 22%. Again, it's one poll, early days, but that should be sort of an alarm flashing for Starmer, I think. And obviously in all those three, Reform has a comfortable lead because Labour has been cut down so low. But it's not just Labour that will, in theory, be hurt by this. In fact, the Greens will probably be hurt more so because actually a lot of people on the left who don't like what Starmer's doing have already moved away from Labour, and a lot of them have found refuge in the Greens as a sort of further left alternative to Starmer's Labour. So those polls show the Greens falling back down to about 5%. And so that's about almost halving of what they're on currently in the polls.
Wow.
So that's pretty dramatic for the Greens. So they might be the most worried about it. That sort of sums up how we got here. But
yeah. Okay. And so to recap, you said Zara Sultana and Corbyn have both lost the Labour whip. And this happened about a year ago, right? And it was over the two-child benefit cap suspension. So other than, I guess, support for a strong welfare state, you mentioned Gaza, what other kind of policy platform are people generally expecting this party to have, and how also will it differ from what the Greens are offering?
I think that's a very good question, and that's sort of the big question, because both have talked about sort of uniting this network of independent MPs and councillors across the country, because there are quite a lot of them. And while there is that similarity on sort of economically left-wing stuff and the sort of similar position on the war in Gaza. I think the big question is stuff like social issues. I don't know where the party will stand on that, because Zara Sultana is a very young MP. Corbyn also is quite, strongly socially left-wing, but some of his fellow independent MPs that he already formed this sort of independent grouping in Parliament that were elected quite strongly because of their views on Gaza. They're less socially liberal than Corbyn and Sultana are. So I don't know how that sort of divide will be addressed. I think we also don't know to what extent this how sort of top down this party will be, or if it will be a sort of wide big tent network where everyone's sort of on equal footing, or if it will be like a very much Corbyn and Sultana in charge thing. And I think that will be when we get an idea of what the answer to that question is. I think we'll be able to sort of assess where it will go from there, because having a party that is very egalitarian and not very sort of like top down, that's quite a difficult thing to break through with. I think you do need that sort of strong leadership, at least in the early days, to try and push through.
Yeah. It's interesting, and you mentioned this a bit before about the way this party was first announced, and there were some commentators, and particularly I remember The Spectator was really reveling in the fact that this party had got off on the wrong foot, or to a pretty bad start, in the fact that there was already infighting supposedly in the way that it was announced. So to go back for anyone who missed this at the time, I remember it was a Thursday evening. I was at home. Someone sent into our work chat Zara Sultana's X post, in which she had this big statement in which she criticised the government's welfare cuts. She criticised the rising wealth inequality in the UK and the growing number of billionaires. And she said in a sentence that she and Jeremy Corbyn would co-lead a new party. And I remember reading this, and at first I thought, oh, this is interesting, would make a good video. I then immediately thought, I wonder what Corbyn's saying about this. Something about this seems a bit odd to me. So I went straight to Jeremy Corbyn's X page and scrolled, and there was nothing there. And I thought this was very odd. And I wondered, I wonder if there's been some kind of miscommunication between them, because seems really strange to me that Zara Sultana would be the one to announce this. And then sure enough, about an hour later, I think Ben then sent a follow-up message from a journalist who said, I have it on good authority that Jeremy Corbyn is, quote, bewildered and furious that Sultana had announced this new party, I guess, behind his back, or there'd been some kind of miscommunication. But do you think that that is a harbinger of perhaps like leadership tensions to come?
Yeah, it might be. I mean, a lot of people were saying like, well, clearly this means it's sort of dead on arrival, but I definitely don't think that's the case, because voters won't remember that at all. But it, the main thing is, like you said, it suggests that there is a difference in approach to leadership and how they want to go forward. Sultana obviously wanted to just get on with it, and I think Corbyn, I don't want to try and read his mind, but when he announced it, he took a very long time to announce his independent run to be, when he ran again in Islington North, he sort of left it quite late to announce that. So you sort of get the sense that he is someone who wants to like plan quite a lot and leave it later to make these kind of announcements, rather than just like jump in early. So that could be a bit of a sort of point of difference between them. But I think ultimately the idea that they would co-lead the party is a sign that the British left can't just rely on Jeremy Corbyn anymore. Like he was Labour leader for 2 elections in a row. He wasn't made Prime Minister. And a lot of people obviously have strong feelings about him, but I think it's a sign that the British left can't just keep trying to push him. And Zara Sultana is obviously the closest thing to a sort of successor that he might have. So I think part of it is keeping Corbyn there as the sort of big name, big authority, and maybe the mentor, and Sultana as the sort of the heir, I suppose. Whether that actually works out smoothly as that remains to be seen, but I do think that's the sort of intention there. Yeah,
I was about to say, I think despite what you've said about Corbyn having been a former Labour leader, having, led and failed at the 2019 general election, the Labour Party. He, in terms of name recognition, even internationally, I think if you asked most kind of distant observers of British politics which politicians could they name, I think Corbyn would be up there. And in the UK, he does have just that name recognition, brand recognition. Yeah, I don't know.
It says a lot that a party that there's no information about other than it would be led or co-led by Jeremy Corbyn, that it can get 10 to 15% in polling. Yeah, that just sort of demonstrates his name recognition.
Is there so how much detail is there from this? Is it an MRP poll that find out now?
No, it's literally
just a random
vote share.
That's interesting. I saw something, and I really wish I had the source for it now, but I don't. I saw something vague about, potential distribution of votes for this new Corbyn Sultana party geographically, and it was, as you might expect, massively concentrated in and around London, and their support elsewhere in the country wasn't that high at all. And I think that's also something I could see being an obstacle for them.
Yeah.
And I think it was for Corbyn in 2019 as well.
I suppose what we don't know is what the ultimate goal is. I mean, we can kind of assume, like, I don't think Jeremy Corbyn and Zara Sultana are going into this thinking we're going to win an election.
Yeah.
It's like the Lib Dems. They don't go into an election thinking we're going to come out and be prime minister. But I think getting something like 10 to 15% of the vote and some number of seats in the current political environment, which is so fractured between many more parties than we're used to, that would give them significant leverage, I think. And I think that's what the party is about, rather than one that really thinks it might obtain actual power. I think it is one that will see its role as trying to push left. And so either, causing enough fear in Labour that they'll lose votes to them, that Labour shifts left, or if we have a hung parliament of some kind, that they have enough seats to sort of force whatever government that forms to move left a bit. And I do think it's interesting that it's sort of, it's another step towards a more European style system where, in lots of countries in Europe, you have a lot more parties, and there's always like a sort of further left.
Yeah.
It's often described as hard left party that sort of reliably gets like 5 to 10% of the vote, doesn't often get involved in coalition negotiations, but it's a pretty solid block in Parliament, and does feel like we're moving towards that.
Yeah, I don't know if you've got this in your mind as well, but I'm thinking Germany. As soon as I saw this party announced, and I thought about the split of parties. If you compare so we imagine this party exists now, and where the places they occupy on the political spectrum, and you think about the parties that exist in Germany currently, I think you can map quite neatly. Yeah. AfD to Reform. Obviously, there's differences there, and I'm not trying to equate them, but if we're going for an equivalence. CDU and Conservatives, SPD and Labour,
and Greens and Greens.
Greens and Greens.
Actually, I suppose it'd be Greens and Lib Dems. I don't know.
Maybe, yeah, that's an interesting one. Or Greens and Greens, and then Die Linke, which obviously had a massive late surge ahead of the federal election in February, and this new Corbyn Sultana party. And then obviously the Lib Dems. I don't know where they would fall into that. You could just put them together with the Greens.
It's not a perfect analogy, but
FDP potentially. But yeah, it's not a perfect analogy. But I do see similarities there, and I think the other thing I thought when I initially heard about this Corbyn Sultana party was that co-leadership itself reminded me of the co-leadership of Die Linke. Yeah, you've got the old school socialist. I can't remember his name.
Yeah,
but
says a lot. I suppose.
And then the young kind of millennial, very social first woman. And similarly, I also thought of Bernie Sanders and AOC in the States. And I wonder whether these new partnerships of like the old school socialist
traditional left,
traditional left with the new kind of millennial
who understands TikTok
TikTok women, whether that is like it
might be a winning formula.
We'll have to see.
Winning, but
not winning. Well, it depends what they
I do think I think it is more, it does feel more like Corbyn's strength I think him leading a smaller, more reliably left-wing party that isn't necessarily going to win power, but is there as a
pressure force.
I think that feels more Corbyn than like running Labour, I suppose, given what happened. But it's going to be very interesting. And all this talk about, if he'd have done this before 2024, before that election, everyone would have been saying, you're going to split the Labour vote, Conservatives will stay in office, or Reform will win, whatever, something like that. But we're at a point now where I think people really aren't that worried about vote splitting because it's so fractured. And, it looks, Reform are leading the polls anyway, with Labour having shifted to the right. It's sort of like, what have you got to lose by voting for someone else at this point?
Yeah. Final question before we move on to our cabinet review. And this might tie in with some of the stuff that we will talk about in the cabinet review, but how we've talked a lot on Starmergeddon previously with Ben about the supposed death of the two-party system or the emergence of a new multi-party system in the UK. This serves as further evidence of that, no? How do you interpret?
Absolutely.
Interpretate? Just made up a word, interpretate. How do you interpretate that?
I agree completely with that interpretation. We have, there have been upstart parties in the past. We've had Change UK / the Independent Group for Change, whatever you want to call them. And people have been saying, well, they came and went very quickly as a sort of way to sort of write off the Corbyn Sultana party. I don't think that's a fair comparison. It's a very different sort of situation. But yeah, this is just yet another option for voters. We're so used to just being either Labour or Conservative that suddenly when you have, Lib Dems approaching 20%, Reform beating both Labour and the Conservatives, it feels like anything could happen. And I think that is why Sultana felt comfortable sort of jumping in and saying, look, we're gonna start this new movement.
Yeah. It is very interesting, and who knows what will happen. Keep following Starmergeddon to keep up with all the movements. Now, before we move to our cabinet review, we are going to, of course, talk about our wonderful new magazine, Too Long, themed around the end of the American order. But it's not just about American politics. There's also lots of other stuff in there as well. And I want to show you this page specifically, which I think is one of my favorites in terms of the design. And it's very Starmergeddon, fits Starmergeddon very nicely. So this is Ben's article about Farage and Reform. And I also really liked how Ben had written this because it was very Ben style, like starting back in 1985 or whatever. But it was about Farage, a bit about kind of Farage's journey into politics before he became the agitator that we know him as today. And then just talking through all the various different parties that he'd set up and how they'd done and how they
long road to possibly being in number 10. Yeah,
exactly.
I was going to say we should say them. We have sent this off to print now, which is very exciting. I think this is the first podcast we've recorded since sending it to print. So it will be in our hands very soon. Well, I mean, the sort of unfinished version is already in our hands, but the finished version will be in our hands very soon and therefore shipped out very soon and in your hands if you've bought it, which you should.
Too Long from our hands to yours.
Very nice.
So if you'd like a copy, and you really should do because it's beautifully designed and written, then you can go to toolong.news and use the discount code BESTOFFER to purchase a subscription. That will get you 35% off your first edition. And then from there on in, you will get 20% off every issue as long as you remain a subscriber as well. And so Jack has run the maths, and that actually gives you 48% off your first issue if you use the code BESTOFFER and do so now, bringing down the price of your first issue to £5.20.
Which is crazy cheap.
That's like a meal deal these days.
Yeah.
Some meal deals probably paying more than that.
And you're not going to learn anything from a meal deal.
And you're not going to learn anything from a meal deal. So definitely do so. And I should tell you as well, this offer ends on Wednesday the 23rd. So
that's soon.
Get in there, be speedy. And also I would like to say, before we move on to our cabinet review, thank you to everyone who emailed in after I shot my message down the barrel of the camera to send us letters, because we did get a whole load of letters. I've read every single one of them. Sorry if I haven't got back to you yet. It's been a very busy time. But that was really great. And it was also really cool to, I think, remind ourselves that people do listen to the podcast. And they do want to engage. So thank you so much to everyone who did that. We've chosen 3 great letters, and you'll be able to read them as well from your fellow TLDR viewing people. So with that, let's get back to Starmergeddon. Today, we are going to be talking about the Deputy Prime Minister and the Secretary of State for Housing, Communities and Local Government, Angela Rayner. And why are we talking about Angela Rayner?
So we're talking about Angela Rayner because her department has just introduced the English Devolution and Community Empowerment Bill, which is this big bill, 338 pages, which is aimed to sort of drive Labour's devolution revolution that they've been talking about. I think it's, it might sound dry. Some people might not find devolution interesting. I know you're not one of them. You're big on devolution. And I wrote a video about this that is probably out by now. So I've spent far too long scrolling through that bill, trying to understand it. I think there's so much to say about it, but the things I find most interesting from it are, one, the return to supplementary vote for mayoral elections, which reverses this Conservative first past the post change, which only lasted about 2 years. And two, well, there's way more than two things that are interesting, but two on that sort of side is the community right to buy initiative, which basically gives community groups first dibs on buying assets of community value, which could be like a swimming pool or a park or a community centre or a pub or something. I think those are really interesting. But what the overarching theme of Labour's devolution push is to scrap two-tier councils and replace them with unitary authorities around the country, and then create higher-level strategic authorities which comprise multiple councils that are led. These strategic authorities led by mayors like Andy Burnham, Sadiq Khan, those types, and they want a mayor in every part of the country. So this is a really dramatic change to the system of local governance in England. But something I've been thinking about since writing that video, and I didn't have space, unfortunately, to get into the video, is that I feel like the use of the phrase devolution almost shouldn't really apply in this case. Like I really like the plans that they're putting forward on this, but devolution just doesn't feel right. If you think devolution is the transfer of power from Westminster to places, more local bodies around the country, it sort of isn't doing that. What it is doing is creating these bigger authorities sort of above council level and giving mayors these enhanced powers, but those powers are actually, in lots of cases, coming from either new or coming from councils that are being abolished or losing those powers. So it's not, I don't feel like it's true devolution in that sense, even though I do like this idea. It does feel like a bit of a misnomer. So there has been some criticism of this use of devolution, and there'll be lots of councils around thinking, great, we're losing our powers, and you're talking about local level government, but you're actually taking our powers and giving it to someone else, a directly elected mayor. But I do like it. I do like this idea that we're going to have a sort of full map of mayors across the country by some point, because currently the English local government setup is such a mess. It's so inconsistent, and the goal of this bill is to standardise that, but it will be a messy process to get to that point, I think.
That is a really interesting point you've just raised about the concept of devolution itself that I hadn't necessarily thought about, and I haven't read the bill, so I can't speak to it to the depth that you can. What were the most interesting things within the bill that you found personally?
So I've mentioned supplementary vote and community right to buy, but the other big thing is that mayors, as leaders of these strategic authorities, are going to be given much stronger powers to push through developments, house building and sort of infrastructure building. This is all part of Labour's goal to build 1.5 million houses and sort of drive, push away the NIMBYs and drive through with this sort of YIMBY agenda. So these enhanced powers for mayors will hopefully allow that to happen. I think that is one of the big changes. Whether or not it will happen anytime soon, because it is a process to sort of create these strategic authorities and create these new mayors. So it's not going to be an immediate thing. So I don't know exactly how much it will help with the 1.5 million target by the end of Parliament, but yeah, I think that's a big one. And again, it's not as sort of it's not as sexy as some other parts of the bill might be. Supplementary vote is a lot more fun, I think. But I do think though it's those sort of slightly drier but important powers given to mayors for infrastructure and development that is actually a really significant change.
And so is this bill designed basically to change the local government system, interminably?
So yeah, it's to...
What is it actually? Basically, I'm asking, are we going to see more elections for mayors in the next few years?
We will, but not just because of this bill. That is a process that is still going on.
Yeah.
It's between governments and sort of local areas where they're trying to agree these devolution deals. By next year, I think there's going to be 6 more mayoral or sort of authorities led by mayors. This bill doesn't actually establish any new ones,
right?
But it sort of establishes the powers and role that these new ones will have once they are agreed between government and local areas. So it's just it's one part in the government sort of devolution process. But yeah, it's in theory, these strategic authorities are meant to be formed by consensus between local authorities and government. But the bill does actually give Secretary of State for Housing, Community, whatever it is, Angela Rayner, basically the power to just say we're going to create these strategic authorities without local consent if they fail to sort of come to an agreement.
I see.
So
that feels almost the opposite of what devolution is supposed to be doing. That's just Westminster saying, the way you phrased it sounds like Westminster saying we're going to introduce this bill so that if XYZ doesn't work out, then we can come in and override.
Yeah, it is quite top-down devolution, which sort of is a strange
it's
way
very
of doing
strange.
it. But I think the way our government is set up is that, Parliament is so supreme that there isn't really a way of doing devolution that isn't just powers being granted from government or Parliament. It's you can't really, I don't really think there's a way of doing grassroots devolution.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Something else I think I saw online, is it right that this bill also gives mayors the powers, and maybe this links in with what you were talking about with house building, is designed to give mayors the powers to override local council objections to planning? Yeah,
it's not quite as black and white as that, but fundamentally, mayors will have stronger powers to local planning authorities to sort of override those vetoes by local planning authorities. It won't be the case in every situation. It's case by case, I think, and there are various hoops that the mayor would have to go through in that situation, but basically it gives them greater powers to push through developments like that, which again is moving power from that local authority level to the higher mayoral level.
Wow, very interesting.
Yeah,
very interesting.
It's it's weird. I'm conflicted about it because I like the thing that the system that's setting up, and I like the idea of these mayors having these powers, but I do feel it's not. Devolution isn't the right word, basically.
Wow. Maybe they should define a new title for their bill.
Maybe.
Also suggest in the comments.
Yeah.
And now we'll come to our final story of Starmergeddon today, which is just going to be a quick one, more of a headline than anything else. But this is about Starmer suspending another 4 Labour MPs from the party, removing the whip from these 4 MPs. And on top of that, stripping 3 Labour MPs of their trade envoy roles. And this is because this group of 7 Labour MPs all voted against the government's welfare reforms in early July. And this is very reminiscent of what happened last summer when Labour suspended the whip of 7 MPs who voted to scrap the 2-child benefit limit going against the government. And so I guess, quick question for you. What do you think this says about the direction of the current Labour government? What does it say about Starmer's leadership?
I think it's not a great sign for Starmer's leadership.
I agree.
Because it's obviously meant to be seen as Starmer proving his authority over the party. But when you consider how he got to this point, it really just looks a bit, I don't know if petty is the right word, but it looks like someone who doesn't actually feel in control. The whole saga with the welfare cuts that got sort of U-turned on, Starmer didn't give enough attention or take the potential rebellion seriously enough at the start. He didn't consult his party enough at the start, right up until the point where he was forced into quite an embarrassing U-turn right up against the sort of the time limit. And now, yeah, these suspensions, I think, just look more like the act of a weak prime minister than a strong one. And I don't necessarily think it's going to encourage or discourage Labour MPs from rebelling in the future.
No, I think if anything, it could have the opposite effect.
Yeah, because these were sort of, the ringleaders of the rebellion, but they're not, or at least most of them are not like, really your classic like left-wing Labour rebels. And I do think there should be space in a party to challenge the leadership's position on things. And I know this rebellion was a dramatic way of doing that, but I think if you try and shut down any form of, the best way to stop these rebellions is to consult your party and have good communication with them from the very start. Yeah, doing this is sort of the wrong way around, I think. Yeah,
which again seems to be a pattern that we've also spoken about on Starmergeddon before, where Starmer will react or will respond too late to something that's already happened. And I think even, when he makes a U-turn and then we'll say, we're listening, it's like, well, you should maybe do the listening first so that you don't make the mistake that leads to the U-turn.
Yeah.
And it seems to be another one of those kinds of things where, retroactively, there's, Labour are taking these punitive measures towards their own MPs instead of listening to them in the first place. So I agree. I think it does suggest weak leadership, or, at best, no, yeah.
There's no best. Yeah.
There's no best.
Just weak leadership.
I think so. And with that, unless there's anything else you want to add, I always ask, and there's never anything else.
I'm sort of interested to see what people think about those suspensions. If you disagree with our take on it, interested to hear it. So comment down below.
Yeah, maybe it's something to do with like your conviction in doing so. And I think, again, we've spoken about this on the podcast before, but Starmer never seems to have that conviction that what he's doing is the right thing to do, and he believes it all the way.
Yeah.
I think if you want to clamp down on your own MPs and, you believe that suspending them is the right thing to do and they ought to lose the whip, and you come out and you sell that and you believe it, fair enough, people would accept. But I think the fact that this is happening and everyone's just thinking, what are Labour doing?
Yeah.
It's not a good sign. But as Rory says, would like to hear your takes. Similarly with the Corbyn party.
What should it be called?
Yeah, and the English devolution bill. Is it devolution? Are we wrong? Is Rory wrong?
Yeah.
Let us know down below. And audio copies of Too Long, and have a lovely weekend.
I probably won't be back. You'll be back.
You won't be back?
Not on Starmergeddon.
Oh, Rory. I was like,
not after this weekend. I mean, no, Ben. I assume Ben will come back.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I forgot about that. So, we'll be.
Forgot about Ben already. Can't believe it.
He'll be back from Canada.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm allowed to say that. Well, it's all over his Instagram. Everyone's seeing it now anyway. We'll be back with Ben in 2 weeks' time. Have a great time until then. Bye.
Bye-bye.